Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And on this episode, my guest is Julie Yack, a Microsoft MVP and Dynamics 365 CRM expert. When she's not helping to lead Colorado technology consultants, you're likely to find Julie active in another role in the Microsoft ecosystem, like organizing the XRM Virtual community, training customers, or participating at a conference. On this episode, we talk conferences, training, including the new online training venture that Julie is involved with, and keeping up with the Dynamics 365 product roadmap. All right, Julie Yack, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
So I know we've crossed paths recently, but at an event or two, but haven't caught up in a while. You were telling me just as we got started here, you were at the Business Applications Summit a couple of weeks ago in Seattle.
That's correct.
All right, excellent. And I think before that, I last caught up with you at the most recent Extreme 365 US event. I guess that was in 2017 now. I'm getting my dates messed up. But that was several months ago anyway.
Right.
You were running, you were helping organize the hackathon there and sort of participating that way with a lot of developers, right?
Yep, that's correct. That's a great event, and I love the their hackathon is called the Innovation Challenge.
Right, it is called the Innovation Challenge.
So yeah, that's always a fun event to mentor and to work with.
Yeah, you let me even pop my head in one of the days while the different teams, I think there were 3 or 4 teams, and they were sort of really in the early stages of trying to come up with an idea that they could really buy into, I think, is maybe the way to say it, because they're, we're sort of mixed groups, right? People come in from different organizations with different skills and try to build something together, maybe with not knowing each other, right?
Absolutely. And so, yes, technically speaking, there's registration for the event, but also for the App Challenge Day, often people just show up and say, hey, can I join you guys today? So we really don't know what collection of skills or personalities we're going to have until we get started.
Yeah. So my view of that, not to spend too much time on it, but my view of that was I saw some of the original sort of discussion where they were still very early on, and then I didn't see it again until they actually presented. So it was like 2 days later. It was a pretty big difference. They had really changed the directions on a lot of what they'd been talking about. Probably a lot of it was unrecognizable. But yeah, it was a pretty cool project. I'm guessing not the first one you've been involved with. Maybe not the last either.
Yeah, I hope so. I have raised my hand to say that I'll be there in Austin to run that again if they'd like me there.
Mm-hmm. And what did you think of the Business Application Summit a couple weeks ago?
Well, it was an interesting event. I'm very glad that I went, but it was kind of the iteration of a couple of past events and then a new name with some new content. So I believe this came from Tech Conference, which was AX focused, and then also from some Power or something or other conference, and then they recognized that there had been a gap with the loss of convergence, and so they kind of made it more Dynamics platform all up focused. And so the content was good. The content was, for all intents and purposes, delivered by Microsoft. There were a handful of us that did some theater sessions, but nice to hear some stuff from the product team. Nice to have those conversations with folks that may be hearing that stuff for the first time.
Interesting, yeah. I certainly agreed. It was nice to hear from Microsoft again. Some of the without them pushing their own event. Sometimes the teams tend to go a little quiet, and I think it keeps them motivated, if nothing else. I'm interested to see how it evolves. I think they are planning another one for next year.
Yes, I've heard grumblings, but I've not heard anything concrete yet.
Yeah, well, we will see. But yeah, I learned stuff anyway. I mean, I think as someone who's working with the products all the time, maybe less of it was brand new to you, but to the rest of us, I think maybe even more of a learning experience.
What is it? I can neither confirm nor deny.
um, and actually, I think most recently I poked my head in on an XRM Virtual event actually earlier this week, which was pretty good, and that's what I've been, I think, on the mailing list for those events and that ongoing project. Maybe you could tell us a little more, but for years now, and it's really gone strong, and you keep putting out, and you're one of the driving forces behind it, right? But you keep putting out a lot of sort of great interactive, kind of fun, sort of casual sessions. Can you tell me a little more about XRM Virtual and how it's evolved over the years?
Sure. Well, I'm a guess the only original cast member left. We've kind of evolved a little bit. We started, I want to say, almost 10 years ago. We were using ADX portals. That's
Right.
what prompted all of this. Shannon and I started the user group, and it launched at Convergence one year, and we instantly had hundreds of members, and now we have thousands. And we try our best to follow some of the golden rules of typical user groups, be consistent. So we try to meet on Tuesdays, ideally the first Tuesday of the month. Recently, we've had a lot of great content that was offered up. So we're having 2 meetings a month, which is nice. We've got our core group of volunteers, myself, my husband, David Yack, Daryl Labar, and Colin Vermander from the group formerly known as ADX/Adoxio. We all work together on the group, but yeah, I am the driving force. Let's see, what else? We like to have a good time. We like to learn. I'm always open for new speakers and new topics. And one of my big personal pushes is making sure that developers know more than just how to write code.
Is it, would you say that many of the members are people who have their hands on code at some point in their day?
Yes, that's actually our target audience.
Mm-hmm.
So we have been the go-to user group for CRM developers. Now XRM is CDS, is XRM. So all of that combined together is still our same platform that we've been using and evangelizing for years.
How would you say that core sort of membership component of XRM Virtual has been adapting as the Microsoft platform has evolved?
Well, we have a core collection of people who are at every meeting. And this is very much true for pretty much any user group, whether it's a virtual group or a traditional on-premise group that meets, in a school classroom or Microsoft Office or wherever they find space. But we also get people that just join us for the topic at hand. The group that we had this week were very interested in the dashboard building that Chuck Sterling was showing us. And then the next meeting, I believe, is Jason Cosman. And if I should have looked up the topics before we scheduled this call, but I know we've got him scheduled. So we just continue to evolve, hopefully, to meet the needs of our user base.
The tech that was shown off in the most recent session that I caught was, some of it was preview, some of it was preview capabilities. I forget exactly which components of it, maybe, but in any event, it was brand new stuff. It was a little, I mean, it was presented that way. It was, some of the bits were perhaps a bit rough because of that, but the people seem generally receptive to kind of like, seeing what's next versus what they're already using with their clients or with their own company.
So you have essentially 2 paths, right? You have people who are gung-ho and excited about everything that's new, and the people are being dragged kicking and screaming because it's outside their comfort zone. And as developers on the platform, we're not going to have much choice moving forward other than to continue moving forward. So there's still those random implementations on CRM 2011 where somebody feels that they need to have a server in their own closet to manage. And so there's going to be work for those people for a while, for better or for worse. And I'd like to think that our community specifically is used to seeing the latest and greatest. We don't typically host a meeting for 2 versions ago of a Dynamics release. You're going to get what's now and what's next when you join our meetings.
You mentioned that the sort of the ADX Studio, now Adoxio team, some of the leaders there were instrumental in helping start the group. And one of the other things I know of from them, and I guess Shan MacArthur, who's now at Microsoft in particular, is application lifecycle management. Does that come up often in meetings, and do you think that's either a concern or something people are paying close attention to right now?
That's an absolutely worthy topic of conversation. It's one that needs to be had, and we've had, meetings here and there about it in our past. I know that we're kind of on this interesting time frame where the technology is changing so fast. As you saw in the meeting that we just had, that maybe a button that was on the top right corner last week is not on the top right corner this week. And so we really need, for our community, for all of our implementations, to have some good application lifecycle management. And I do fear that, I've seen many folks that aren't practicing that very well. So maybe you have a speaker you can recommend for us that can come talk to us about that.
I'll have to think about that one. Yeah. It just seems like it's going to be even more of a pressing issue as Microsoft gets more strict about some of these, cloud update policies that have been probably one of the hottest topics of discussion, I would say, in the last couple months now, that Microsoft's made some clarifications around that as a broad policy for business apps with twice yearly updates and, supposedly the ability to keep features turned off for some amount of time if you want to, and shorter acceptable time frames that you can sort of hold off on updates.
Right.
And so all the sort of promises that go along with that, I suppose, from Microsoft's side.
Trying to get everyone on the consistent same platform.
Yeah. It's going to be a huge challenge. I think I plan to pay close attention. I'll put my some thought to who else we can both ask more about that one and talk more about it. Interestingly, I did hear from the stage at the PZF Summit that Shan actually might be one of the people at Microsoft that's going to continue to be a leading thinker on this topic from their side, which I thought makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's interesting to hear, because I don't hear from Shan that much anymore. He now that he's at Microsoft, so
right, he's very busy being innovative.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that will help moving forward with at least team contributions to customizations and lifecycle management and that whole topic would be the community license that you can have now, that is essentially a developer instance.
Okay, so that's a developer instance of the D365 customer engagement apps?
I'm not sure exactly what they're calling it, or what the components are, but the intent behind it is to give you a developer environment.
Yeah.
So if you're managing a team of developers, you're not having to pay for a collection of environments for each one, or for burning through trials all the time. That each developer, each contributor can have their own individual environment, and then you can have someone who's the master of the solutions, and then just have the single sandbox instance where all of those individual pieces come together.
Okay. Yeah, definitely something to watch. So I know that beyond XRM Virtual and all the other sort of community-based events and efforts that you're involved in, training's a big component of where you spend your time. And one thing you told me about is plans for a new training, service/site 365 training. Maybe you want to tell me a little bit more about what those plans are?
Yep, actually it's 365 training. We've got all those new possibilities with URLs these days. So we are a training platform, and we looked around and tried out a few different platforms that other folks had that you could just scan and use on your own. And we couldn't find anything really that fit all the moving parts that we wanted, so we just made our own. So we have, and it's managed in Dynamics from a content perspective.
Oh, okay.
But it's got video learning, it has hands-on labs, it's got assessments you can do, all those different things you might want from a training platform. And we are in beta these days. So anyone that wants to go try out 365.training, we have most of the content is currently free. We, I think, have one course right now that you can pay for on some custom connectors if you want to learn about that. But we're working on a subscription-based model, and hopefully we'll have that out soon. And also at the same time working on making sure we have enough content so that people feel that it's worth paying for a subscription.
And we should say this is sort of another endeavor for you. You're also a principal at Colorado Technology Consultants, right?
Right.
As another business that you're kind of working in regularly.
Right. So that's our primary. That's always been the work that pays the mortgage, and that is we pick and choose projects based on things that are interesting or where we can make a difference, or we can go in and do a quick rescue. We're very, very selective on the projects that we pick. And then we also do, as you had mentioned, loads of training. So we do training on behalf of Microsoft and to others who are interested in Microsoft technologies.
Right. So someone might have seen you or maybe your husband, David Yack, do training, right? Or maybe other people from your team, either on Microsoft's own hosted training platforms, perhaps elsewhere.
Yes. So we do in-person trainings. As a trainer, that's my favorite one to do, is the in-person training. You can really engage the room a lot better in person versus a virtual training.
Oh, yeah,
but
no question.
Those also cost a lot of money to do. So those aren't always what we get. And then we do virtual live deliveries, and we've also recorded content. So you may have heard us with our recordings on both the Microsoft platform and other platforms, like we used to do courses for Pluralsight.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so this really the 365.training is really coming. It's not coming out of nowhere. It comes from a long history of developing a lot of training and capturing some of that in a new site.
Well, it's really the evolution of publishing. You may be aware of the books that we've edited and authored and published in the past. And it's just so difficult and time consuming to do an actual end-to-end book that it's not really a good idea anymore. It's not really very lucrative. We've, made a fair bit of money publishing our books, but it's also a fair bit of work. And so to have the ability to have more dynamic content, and it's so much quicker to make a quick video course than it is to manage a collection of authors and worry about all of the different formatting and other overhead items that you get with publishing of a physical book. So this basically is just the evolution of publishing.
Well, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about some of the particular products that you're paying attention to now, either when it comes to training or whether it comes to other kinds of consulting that you do. The Microsoft Biz App space has expanded so quickly that really experts like you really have to, I guess, probably be fairly selective on where you spend your time learning and developing, your expertise. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's very fair to say. I think that in order to do my job well, I need to know at least a little bit about a lot of things, and then a lot about a few things. So I should be able to go pretty deep in conversations and in implementation details of certain parts of the platform, but then also the marketing application, for example, not my thing. But I know enough about it to know when it applies to an implementation or doesn't, or when it's time to recommend someone look into it. And so for me, I have to know several different moving parts. I have to know enough about Azure to know when it's time for somebody else to help me.
Well, what are some of the areas where you're diving in most deeply these days?
I've been getting fairly engaged with the Sales Navigator solution. So that comes from LinkedIn, and it is integrated with Dynamics 365 for customer engagement. So old school CRM, where you can put directly on your CRM forms widgets of information that come from the LinkedIn Sales Navigator product. So for people who may not be familiar with Sales Navigator, it's more than just your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn has several additional paid options for running your business and growing your business. It's not just about a profile of someone or a premium profile of someone. There are sales tools where you can go out and prospect and find more business. And so one of those tools is Sales Navigator. And the partnership with Microsoft since the acquisition has helped further the cause to get more of that integration and use more of the platform to showcase the, the deep need for seeing that profile information, whether it be for an individual or a company, within the context of your CRM records.
Okay. I mean, I have to say, you're one of the first people I've talked to who seems to have really explored it. A lot of sort of people who have a lot of Dynamics 365 experience tend to tell me that they haven't done much with it, and I don't know exactly why. But how did you get interested in or involved in working with it? Any particular case studies or situations that led you to it?
Well, actually, through my work with Microsoft. So one of the hats that I wear is a Microsoft vendor, doing the training delivers on their behalf. And they have been partnering a pilot program for Sales Navigator / LinkedIn partners to work with Microsoft partner opportunities. And there was a global tour for delivering training for these first group of partners. And I was involved in that, making the content and delivering the content. So I'm not a salesperson. I don't have salespeople. Anyone who's tried to have me help them with the sales call knows that that's not something you want to do.
Okay.
And for me, things are very cut and dry. Can you do this? Yep, I can. Anything else?
Okay.
So I'm not good at that. But going to these different partners and exposing them to the solution and then watching the growth of the solution on the Dynamics platform has been very rewarding and very engaging. So we've got two different solutions to choose from. If you're on the old school web interface, you have a solution you can install that gives you two widgets, one based on an individual, one based on a company. And within those widgets, you have different tabs of information available, icebreakers, people that you may have in common, and so on. But if you're on the new unified interface, you have a different solution that you can have that makes use of the custom control framework that we now have on the platform. So you can have a custom control that you can put on any form you like and get information about that individual or that company. And it's much smaller consumable pieces. So instead of having one widget with 3 tabs, you have 4 or 5 different widgets that you can work from.
That's interesting. So you've been showing you've spent time sort of going through some of these details and talking through it with a range of different partners out there that Microsoft wanted to make sure were getting exposed to it and learning about the capabilities. Is that how it's how you've been, and what's the reaction been like? Did you come up with any observations on how partners are responding to what you're putting in front of them, what Microsoft's putting in front of them with regard to Sales Navigator integration?
Well, everyone has been very receptive. Obviously, the partners that were chosen for the pilot were chosen for a reason. And so uh, already folks that are deeply in Dynamics, that it just made sense for them to include Sales Navigator in their offering. But in order to do that well, they have to know how to implement it. They have to know how people are going to want to use it. And also, their internal sales teams are using the tool as well.
Yeah, yeah. Any hesitancy or any concerns that people had about it?
People's perception is sometimes, well, it's just one more thing. And while that's true, if you take the time to do the proper implementation and give it to the users that need it, give it to them in the stories that they need it, I think that there's value in it. If all you're going to do is throw it in an iframe and let your users run free, then you're not going to get value out of it. I think most definitely you need to find out, how do sales managers, how do individual salespersons want to use the tool, how can they use the tool, and setting appropriate expectations for using that within Dynamics. You can have these widgets on a form. You can also, on the same account form, throw in stuff from social engagement and be watching those trends and sentiment in the same visual space that you've got these other moving parts.
Sure, sure. And social engagement was, what you just mentioned, was another one I did want to just ask you about. I know you've done, you developed training and spent some time getting into that application too. I feel like it's one that's sometimes tends to go a little out of my view, and then I see it again, and I think it's really great. But what's been your experience working with it, and how's it been going in your view?
I think that it's been going pretty well. From a history perspective, this was an acquisition of a company called NetBreeze, and then it evolved to social listening, and now it's social engagement. And I'm sure we're going to continue to see evolution of the product as we get more and more technology available to us. And I think that it's a great tool for folks who are social media aware, I suppose. It brings in news and things like that, which certainly have value. But the real power is giving you that all-out view of your social online footprint. So where do I have my influencers, whether they're good or bad? Am I super, super popular in Belgium? People love me there. What am I doing right? Do people really dislike me in Spain? And I can find out those details and then help control the message and help control the branding that is out there.
As I've seen it evolve, it certainly seems more refined, and also it seems like the kind of solution that, if you're a business that's, or especially an enterprise or a upper mid-size or enterprise kind of grade company that presumably has team members paying attention closely and managing social media, and you're also using or looking at Dynamics. I mean, it almost seems like you have to pay some or spend some time learning about social engagement, because it's got real verifiable tools associated with it that are pretty impressive in terms of the cognitive capabilities and the international capabilities, especially the way it can work in multiple languages, like you said, and sort of analyze things from so many different dimensions at once.
Well, and the barrier to entry is so low that there's really no reason to not try it out. It's included in licenses for Dynamics Online subscriptions. I'm not sure the exact license you need or the exact number of seats. I'm sure there's a minimum, but you get 10,000 impressions, for lack of a better term, per month with that subscription that doesn't cost you anything. So your risk is super, super low. And who knows, maybe with those 10,000 impressions, you could then grow your social media presence and obviously go buy more impressions and become much more active on social media.
And the fact that, you can tie it into creating support cases, creating leads potentially, or I don't know which entities exactly, but you can tie it into other business processes.
You can tie it into any of the entities, actually.
Okay.
So there's out-of-the-box intelligence built in to analyze and make new cases or make new leads whenever is appropriate. You can set up that automation, but you can also set up automation to make other new records, whether it be with out-of-the-box entities or custom entities. And you can set up as much or as little automation as you'd like around that.
Yeah, I mean it's almost it's a real shame if you're not evaluating it along with other CRM focused tools from Microsoft these days. It really it makes a lot of sense. I would like to see them make it a little more visible. I feel like sometimes I lose track of it, and when I see sort of release notes, they seem a little light. Some I don't know if it's monthly or quarterly, but yeah, I guess my only comment is I'd like to see more about social engagement. Honestly, because they got some great technology and they were able to, as I recall, at least a couple of years ago, they were able to keep some of the team, at least from NetBreeze, on hand. Some of the key people who seemed like the real visionaries of the product. I'm not really sure what the situation is today, but yeah, I mean. It's a product I hope to keep up to date on. I honestly probably slipped a little bit myself.
Yeah, well, this product team has been doing monthly releases for a very long time. So they're doing not only the standard bug fixes and whatnot, but they're doing actual feature releases monthly. And so they've been on that cadence for some time, and they've mastered it. They've been doing quite well at that part of it. So maybe that's why the release notes seem a little thin, because they're just once a month instead of 3 months worth of release notes or 6 months worth.
Yeah, good point. I'm seeing you're seeing a month's worth, which doesn't look as substantial as a quarter's worth or whatever. So yeah, That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now I have a feature request into the team for social engagement. I want to use artificial intelligence for it to suggest search queries for me.
Okay.
Because you already know what I'm trying to learn about, right? You've already got the sentiment engine about what makes people happy or unhappy. Now I want to have you suggest to me what search queries should I be trying.
Yeah. Yep. Or yeah, that's interesting. It certainly makes sense. I'll look forward to seeing that one in there.
We'll see. I don't have nearly as much influence over that as people think I might have.
It's a good idea. I like it. All right. Yeah. Any other product areas that you're particularly kind of involved in or excited about at the moment?
It's nice to watch the evolution of project service automation. It was off to a little bit of a rough start, and I think that it's maturing now as a part of the platform. One of the things that I tend to do is quickly get up to speed on the newer components so that myself or David or another member of our core team can be delivering training to get everybody else up to speed on it. And so I was in that early phase of project service automation, much like the sales navigator component and much like social engagement. So when those additions happen, we get up to speed quickly, teach everybody, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah. So Julie, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been fun to chat and catch up a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it.
I'm sure I'll see you back out on the road somewhere soon.
Yes, 365 Saturdays.
Okay.
And the next one up for me is in Washington, D.C. in September. And then I'm helping to organize one that's going to be held up on the main campus in Atlanta, actually, in November. But we're doing it on a Friday. So we're having a 365 Friday because that particular venue, that particular audience, that region does better on Fridays than Saturdays. So we go where the audience is.
Yeah, right. And those are sort of, if anyone doesn't know 365 Saturday at this point, I mean, most people I think probably have heard of it, but it's a typically a free event, right? And it's locally based. So some people do travel in for them, but they move around to different cities so that different groups can kind of get involved. Although I would say a lot of presenters do tend to travel to them. Correct.
And so the presenters will travel. I've done, I think, half a dozen or so where I've presented at. My husband's done several, and several of the core group of MVPs that do the conference circuit. We've been all going around and trying to be supportive of these local events. So yeah, they are completely community driven. We don't have a set agenda. At least the ones that I've participated in have not had any kind of set agenda. You do a call for speakers and see what comes back and build an event around what people are excited to talk about.
Cool. Well, thanks again. This has been an interesting chance to catch up with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason.
This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to Julie Yack for joining me today. If you have any feedback, let me know. You can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.